Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I am your host, Quianna Canada. Welcome back to Quianna's Shelf. Before we get into tonight's topic, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Remember that your likes and your shares, what it does is it pushes videos like this up in the algorithm. It tells the algorithm that videos like this are important. But we must be reminded that just because videos like this are not pushed up in the algorithm, that is not an indication that videos like this are not important. As a second preliminary matter, don't forget to follow me on Facebook by searching for my name. That is at Quianna Canada. And if you see something on this channel that you wish to debate or talk about, let me know and we'll engage in a discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing our Black History Month, and today I have for you Ralph Johnson Bunche. Now, Ralph Johnson Bunche was an important person in Black American history. He was a political scientist, a diplomat, and a leading actor in the mid-20th century decolonization effort and process in the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. So I think let's start with the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. So Bunche had an amazing curriculum vitae. His curriculum vitae was substantial with human rights efforts and contributions. And he participated in the 1963 March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. gave his "I Have a Dream" speech. And he also marched side by side with Martin Luther King in the Selma Montgomery March in 1965. Bunche was a significant person that contributed to the Voting Rights Act of in 1965, ladies and gentlemen, and it's important for you to understand that although there has been these efforts throughout history from Black Americans to solidify our rights in the soil of the United States, there has been efforts to undermine our contributions. We see this happening right now in many of the red states, conservative states, within the United States, where many of the conservative states are attacking the voting rights of Black Americans and engaged in redlining. And we see this in Texas as many other states. We know that voting is a significant right, a significant civil right in the United States. And the fact that this right is coming under attack under the current administration is deeply unsettling. Now, that was not the only contribution that Bunche contributed in history. So during the 1940s, Bunche mediated the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. And a representative for Israel, I believe that you pronounce the name as Moshe Dayan, reported in his memoirs that much of his delicate negotiation with Bunche was conducted over a billiards table while the two were playing pool. And this was not the only peacekeeping process that Bunche found himself in. I think that this was likely a passion of his because his records showed that he had headed a peacekeeping mission in the Congo, organized and directed a UN peacekeeping force in Cyprus. This negotiation and mediation between Palestine and Israel, I think was an important part of his legacy going back to that. And Bunche was actually the first Nobel laureate and first person of African descent who truly earned and was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize in 1950. Ladies and gentlemen, as I reflect back on the legacy of Ralph Johnson Bunche, I can't help but to think about like my own path and what I wanted to do while I was at Queen's University Belfast. When I was a student at Queen's University Belfast, I was pursuing a master's in international human rights law, and many times when we would study, my cohorts and we would always engage in these reflective conversations about the future. And those conversations were about our career paths. And when it got to me, and the students and my cohorts asked me, well, what do you want to do with your degree? Like, what is your path? What do you plan to do? I always said that I wanted to work for the United Nations and to possibly be a special rapporteur. And while I was in Queen's University Belfast, I read a little bit on Bunche and didn't decide to look more into his legacy until this month when I was doing Black History, this series on Black History. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I think when I reflect on this deeply, what's disappointing to me, what's so disappointing to me is that during my process of attempting to contribute to the world, what was so unfortunate is that I had the United States, the U.S. Consul James Applegate, the U.S. Consul to Belfast, James Applegate, the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland crushing my dreams, the dreams that I had, which they knew, because of course they were engaged in trying to uncover what I sought to do so that they could crush my dreams. And I think it's just so disappointing that during this month we reflect back on much of the work of Black Americans and how Bunche, what he did was he marched with Martin Luther King and was present during the I Have a Dream speech. Much of it was really about Black Americans having the same equal rights as white Americans. And the fact that James Applegate, who is a U.S. Consul to Belfast, who is an Irish American, and the current administration as well as the last administration, and these three nations, the U.S., the Republic of Ireland, and Northern Ireland, have all sought to undermine my path in history, to put up obstacles to stop me from being able to continue on a path of self-determination and to create an amazing legacy that would emulate Ralph Johnson Bunche, such as engaging in the peace process. The fact that they stopped me from doing that, stepped on my dreams, is really disheartening. And I think it's worth mentioning this month because this month is, to reiterate, is Black History Month, and we tie in the past to the present. And much of what has happened in the past is we had departments like the Federal Bureau of Investigations who had a significant and harmful legacy against, who has a significant and harmful legacy against Black Americans, such as the previous director, J. Edgar Hoover, or the director that was during that time in the 1960s, who engaged in much of this fear-mongering, anti-Black racism and anti-Semitism. And to see that starting to play out now, and how I am starting to see that the United States hasn't departed from that harmful legacy, is just really disappointing. But as I continue to reflect deeply on the legacy of Ralph Johnson Bunche, I thank him in history that he had the courage to be at the helm and to broker the peace in the world that we see today. It is because of people like Ralph Johnson Bunche that Palestine, as well as Israel, had moments of peace in their life, although they would continue to be at loggerheads with each other. Black Americans had always wanted these two nations to come together and to resolve their conflicts. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Tell me, what do you think about Ralph Johnson Bunche? And what do you think about the peace process in general? Do you think that Nobel Peace Prizes, should they be earned, or should we give those away freely? Should Nobel Peace Prizes, like, should people such as Ralph Johnson Bunche, who has engaged in many peacekeeping missions, such as in Cyprus and the Congo and other missions around the world, do you think that these are really the people that deserve Nobel Peace Prizes? Or do you think that these peace prizes should be given to any person, such as people that are continuing to instigate war around the world? Is a important question I think that we should be reflecting on. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to talk to you next time. Bye-bye.